Unless you've been living under a rock recently, you have heard everyone and their mother talking about AI and the impact that AI is going to have on this world and our jobs and everything and how quickly it's going to happen. But what does that really mean? What does that translate to? What does that look like? Does that mean no one has jobs? We all have jobs. We have a digital assistant. What does that mean? Well, on this episode of Boundary Breakers, I sit down with Jeff Dance, CEO of Fresh Consulting, who consults with businesses on this very issue. Jeff has some amazing insight about AI in general, robotics, automation, and how these things are going to impact the world. And most importantly, what businesses should be doing to ensure that they stay ahead of the curve. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter & Clark. Tell us a little bit about your background story. Where did you grow up, and what was family life like back then?
Sure thing, and happy to be here. I grew up in Bellevue, Washington, so kind of in the Seattle suburbs. Bellevue in of itself is a big city if Seattle didn't exist, but grew up in this neck of the woods where a lot of great companies were born, likes of Microsoft, Amazon, and others. So grew up in this area. Had 6 brothers, 1 sister, so grew up in a big family, a lot going on in the home. My parents took in 16 others while I was growing up, and so it was. And my dad was an entrepreneur, so there was either kind of boom or bust. And in the bust periods, my mom would go to the Gleaners Association to get the old food that expired to kind of feed all the people in the house. So that was kind of my a bit of my environment growing up. I tried to eat fast to make sure I get a few bites.
I hear you. No, that's great. So where did you fall in line with in birth order with your brothers and sisters?
I was the third.
Yeah. Okay.
I always wanted to be a little different, and that may have some genesis to the creation of Fresh, but they would ski and I would snowboard, or they would be involved in maybe running or something. I would play soccer. So I was always trying to be a little different.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. No, I love it. So then you went from there to BYU, is that right?
Yep.
And then got out, and then tell us about getting out of college and your early career life as you started with Deloitte.
Yeah. Well, I paid for school painting houses, and kind of learned how to get clients and kind of run a team and write contracts and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I got through paying for school. And that helped a lot, and kind of just understanding just the basics of business, like insurance, getting a business set up, that sort of thing. I was a paper boy earlier on and learned how to make money and go door to door and collect what was due. And sometimes people wouldn't pay, Yeah. So I learned some things there, but in school, I actually took some consulting classes, and I was a kind of a student consultant, and we did these paid projects for companies. And I was like, I really like this. And I'd gotten a master's in accounting, and during that time, I ended up being a leader at the Rollins Center for E-Business, which is now what you call like a digital center. And so I was a student leader for 5 semesters, probably more so than anyone else, interacting with engineers and designers, doing some projects like that. And so in school, I also picked up some of these consulting projects, and then I got hired in school as like one of the guys, one of the companies. It was a company that HBO and wanted to hire me out of school as a part-time consultant, helping them with some web properties. And so anyway, this kind of confluence of experience led me to Deloitte's strategy arm. And I joined the strategy side because I did an internship and realized I really didn't like, even though I got a master's in accounting and passed the CPA, I didn't really like that side of work. It just wasn't as exciting. And I think it's great work. It's noble, but it wasn't as interesting to me. And so I started at Deloitte, had these experiences, helping build some things, winning some design awards, like working with designers and developers. And then I kind of carried that into Deloitte, kind of in side projects. And I was on the innovation team.
Okay.
And then when all the technology started changing, I realized, Deloitte wasn't going to kind of act as fast. So this is when like the cloud was coined and smartphones were just getting smart. And the web was getting more dynamic. And so I got excited about helping people adopt some of this new technology and using some of my limited consulting experience, a couple of years and a couple of semesters at school. And that's when I left, when I realized like, I had an idea around that and wanted to, I could have stayed and then tried to do something while I was there, but I wanted to respect the agreements we had.
Yeah.
And so I started fresh back then.
Awesome. No, that's awesome. Well, so I want to dive deep into Fresh and what you guys are doing. But before we get there, so help us understand. So on the strategy consulting team at Deloitte, what type of projects, like what's sort of like a typical type of project that you guys were awarded, and or was there even such a thing?
Yeah.
And sort of how did that work?
Yeah. Well, I think the strategy work at Deloitte is not dissimilar from other strategy firms. It is kind of higher end. It is strategic. I worked for Apple for 6 months on a big technology strategy project where we interviewed all their team members, did a bunch of research, and shared a roadmap for some recommendations. And that'd be an example of some work I did. I worked on an internal merger project where we were looking at how do we bring two different healthcare organizations together? What would that look like? What would the cost savings be? What would be the synergies? I worked on a project on how could we save Circuit City, and what would that look like to have all the different drivers that affect that business, and how would you rearrange things and model that all the way down from the smallest of details all the way up to the share price.
Wow.
So I worked on projects, they were fairly strategic. They had, we'd end up with, plans at the end and recommendations, and there was a lot of analysis going into that work. So it was true strategy work. And I think that was good foundation to know like what good looks like and what it's like to work with some bigger companies.
Absolutely. Now, that's fascinating. I'm curious, was any of this strategy for the Circuit City project, was any of that implemented, or was it?
I think we were caught a little too late in that one.
Gotcha.
It was sort of like last minute, kind of recommendations, and I think it was too late, too much momentum, and they haven't been the only ones that have been a big box kind of retailer that's suffered as a result of Amazon and others taking over the e-commerce landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a fascinating conversation with a board member of Best Buy recently.
Yeah.
All right. So we're right to where you left to start Fresh Consulting. You mentioned that you had a paper route and you painted houses to get through college. I mean, sounds to me like you've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, did you think or know in high school, college, even while you were at Deloitte, that at some point you wanted to start your own business?
Yes. In fact, I did start my own business in college. I started a .com business. It was snowboarders.com, wakeboarders.com with a Z on the end. And we had an online business. I poured all that money that I made, extra money that I made into that business. It wasn't much more than like $11,000. But when I was in college back then, it was a lot of money. Yeah. And I recruited a team to kind of help me develop out those properties. We had like maybe 10 different features on these sites. And then I recruited a partner to help me run it, who came from another e-commerce business. And then I left for a church mission down in Peru for a couple of years. And I was expecting to come back and see at least some things that had grown to some extent. And he was pretty excited. My partner's pretty excited about running this because we'd put a lot of detail into the design and development. It was unique. But, the .com crash happened while I was gone. And so I came back to kind of nothing there, but it was a great learning experience. It helped me think through how do I build something with designers and developers and think about a business model. And so I got some good experience there. When I came back, I took my studies a little bit more seriously and wanted to have some security, some foundation. And I surrounded myself, BYU had a top program in the nation. It was like number 1 or number 2 for accounting. And the people I was interacting with were just super smart. And so I realized that like the more I learned, the more I didn't know. Because when I was going through school, I was like, I just want to get out of here as quick as possible and start a business. And I did have that knack. I mean, when I was 8 years old, I got a briefcase for Christmas and like carried it around because I wanted to go into business,
Yep.
um, and but then I kind of learned a little bit more about the intellectual side and realized how much I didn't know. And the more I studied, the more I didn't know. And so I think that balance is probably good going into starting a consulting business.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really, I think, wise take, right? The more that you studied, the more you realized how much you didn't know. But I could certainly um, understand. I felt that way all through growing up. Is I just wanted to hurry up and get there, hurry up and grow up and get out of
Yeah.
all this time wasting stuff so I can go get to it. So
Yeah.
I hear you for sure. Well, so all right, so you have a great job at one of the top consulting firms in the world, and you decide you're going to start your own consulting business.
Mhm.
Walk us through that first of all, in terms of did you feel like at the time it was a big jump? Were you nervous? And what was your plan? What was your plan going in?
Yeah. Originally, I thought, well, maybe I'll get some experience, and if this works out, then great, and if not, then I'll go to Stanford and I'll do an MBA, because that was like typical for consultants. They would pay for it. Deloitte, they'd pay for your MBA. So I was thinking, I kind of had these options, and then, but the reason I left is because things were changing so much, and I was sitting there, and they weren't talking about it, they weren't working on it, and it
Mm.
was like, look. I was looking at like reports from McKinsey talking about how the future would all be social software. And we just gotten the first social media, and the web was just becoming more dynamic, but we weren't really getting into software as a service yet. And so I was like, oh, no one's talking about this. And it was big. And like I said, the cloud was just coined, smartphones were coming out, and like, this is stuff that's going to change work. It's going to change how work happens. And so I did have a kind of I don't know, I had a knack for kind of like thinking about where things are going. And I was recognized at Deloitte as like a creative person and an innovative person, which was kind of counter to my education, but I more joined the educational program for the network. So that's when I was like, after that recognition, after seeing like getting job offers at some of the places I was working, getting job offer at Apple and some other places, I'm like, hey, they wanted me to take on these leadership positions. I was like, maybe I have some strong capabilities, and I probably was overconfident going into starting my own thing, thinking like, hey, yeah, people are going to want to hire me. And the reality was, when I started it, it was really hard. I was like, I didn't have that big brand behind me anymore. And it was just like, well, yeah, who are you? Who's fresh?
Yeah.
So that was sort of a wake up call early on. And then right before I started it is right when we kind of went into that financial Great Recession. It was like, it was 2007. It was the beginning of another 5-year run. And so we had originally planned to do even more consulting and kind of strategy work, helping companies take advantage of what was new. But people weren't buying that as much, especially my earliest clients were like smaller businesses, and they're like, strategy. They're like, I am the strategy. At a small business, you kind of think you are the strategy, and bigger businesses, they have, they sometimes get a little more risk averse, and they want to be a little bit more thorough in their planning and their execution plans, versus I would say the smaller business sometimes runs with their gut a little bit more. And so it was a little bit harder to get that type of work, especially with the advent of what was going on with this recession, the beginning of a recession. However, what people were buying also was like, okay, there's a new web, there's like new software, and I can be more efficient. I can be more impactful. I could connect with people in a different way. And so we help companies do that. And so, we did follow the market a little bit, early on, in that we were doing a little bit less consulting than I thought we would do. But any of that work came with planning if you're truly trying to make it work for the business. And so, whether that was like software selection or evaluation of systems, or even building like websites that would incorporate more interactive technology, building mobile applications, because that was like a new thing. Mobile apps then were a big thing, like all that stuff was
Yeah.
new that people didn't really know what to do, how to do. And I had the confidence from prior to like surround myself people smarter than me, technical or design oriented, and I would kind of bring the business angle. And that was the genesis of part creative, part technical, part business. And that was what I learned later was like, oh, that's a digital business. That's what digital is, because digital is kind of a new word. It was like analog versus digital. It didn't have the connotation of digital transformation. So I
Yeah, gotcha.
discovered we were a digital business. I didn't decide to start a digital business. I had started what I thought was an important equation to working effectively with technology that actually could work inside of a business. And that was like a human angle with creative, a technical side, and then a business side.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. I love it. I mean, it sounds to me like you're talented, or blessed with sort of the ability to kind of see around the corner, or see like you said, see what's coming, um, before others. And what an exciting time it must have been to. I mean, I'm sure it was nerve wracking, but an exciting time with what you could envision this new technology would do, to be able to partner with businesses in order to leverage it, um, appropriately based on whatever it is they were after. And so, you mentioned something early. We were talking about painting houses. You talked
Mhm.
about that, um, that taught you about business and how to build a team. And talk to us early on. Was it just you? Did you have partners? How did you find, um, talent? And how important has that been, as you've grown your company?
Yeah, yeah. No, definitely. I think a team is really important when you're doing something meaningful. Not much is accomplished by an individual. There's amazing individuals. It's just hard to accomplish bigger things, I think, alone. And I think it's been proven that you need a team, or it's been proven that more often people are successful when they have, uh, some other people they're accountable to. But yeah, I did recruit one other kind of co-founder that was technical earlier on, and then I recruited a kind of a biz dev slash sales person early on as well. And then that was kind of the make of business, technology, and creative. And I consider myself kind of the creative person. And any design related work I actually led with other designers that we would hire. So that I did recruit others, and today, like I keep in touch with Mike Whitmore, who is our early kind of biz dev leader, and then my co-founder Steve, and he came from Amazon. I came from Deloitte. He was one of their Jedis, like software Jedis
Yep.
essentially over there. And so he brought that depth of discipline and excitement about where things were going. And so we were kind of the early founders of the company. And
Yeah.
then,
I love it. I
yeah.
love it. Well, so there are a lot of folks out there right now that they may even be at Deloitte as we speak, but there's a lot of folks that have an itch to go start something,
Mhm.
right? And maybe even they want to start a consulting business, but they get to the point where they can't see. They see where they are at the moment, and they can envision having leading an organization, becoming an entrepreneur, having a successful business, but they can't envision or understand the bridge to get there.
Mhm.
Right? It's like day one. What do I do? Just start Google, or back then, get the yellow pages and start calling businesses. What do I do?
Uh-huh.
How did you guys, or how did you handle those early stages of starting to seed and actually build a business?
Mhm. Mhm. I mean, it centers around obviously some customers, it's like a small customer, any customers, any interaction there helps you understand if you have something, like the day I left Deloitte was the next day they called me and said, "Hey, can you continue to help on this project because we still need you?" And
Mm.
okay, well, I'll take on some contract work. Okay, they need me. There's something there, but like it's like okay, you just learn with like each interaction of like what you have and what you can offer. And I had a network, but it was small. I mean, I was young,
Yeah.
and so the projects were small. But getting a website up, talking about what you do, getting some material around what you do, and being able to present that to others, and then learn through those earliest engagements, like what you're doing well or not doing well, is critical to refining, what might scale.
Yeah.
Uh, but so like I mentioned, our journey wasn't what I thought it would be. It came with the mindset of helping others, and knowing that like, hey, there's a younger demographic that can train people on newer technology because you don't need a lot of experience when something's brand new. you need kind of a passion and an intellect to be like, hey, I can figure that out. I can help. And I understand the other side of implementing something.
Yeah.
So I had some of that, mindset. There's a reverse mentoring opportunity as we think about some of the talent that is playing in these spaces that might be able to help, Hey, we think about like mobile apps and software service. I mean, this is all 90% in the adoption or more space, right? But 15 years ago, these things didn't exist. And think about how much has changed in the last little bit. But so yeah, that was getting customers was big. Learning through that, sticking with it. Even though like I didn't take a paycheck for 2 years. And I was paying others, but I didn't take a paycheck for 2 years. And my wife worked as a teacher, so we had her teacher salary. So we moved out of where we were living, lived with some families, my grandparents actually, before they passed away. And so I like started the company in my grandma's basement, essentially.
Wow.
So you scrap. I remember selling my bike because I needed some more money.
Wow.
And I maxed out my personal credit cards, the company credit cards. It's like, and I remember but our first big win was we got a enterprise customer, it was T-Mobile. And we started with two $2,500 projects of like, or maybe they're $5,000 projects. It was very, very small. But it was like looking at like, how can they make their software more collaborative and build a better workflow management system. And then the other one was like, how can we, there's something wrong with our maps on our website and they're slow. So how do we fix that? And so we started these two consulting projects, and one was technology architecture oriented, one was usability oriented. I guess there's a third one, and that was the maps one. So started with these projects, and then they listened to our recommendations and were like, yeah, can you help us with this? And we're like, yeah, we can. And so that was the beginning of hiring some people to go build, some workflow applications that were collaborative, mirrored off of things like Facebook that had social interaction, along the way.
Yeah.
Process plus social interaction, document management, that sort of thing. And then building their first mobile apps at T-Mobile. And that was the beginning of like a 10-year relationship. And that really helped us, get out of debt early on and, take my first paycheck and stuff like that.
Nice. I love that. So what's interesting is, you mentioned while you were at Deloitte, you were sort of seeing around the bend there was new technology that was coming out that you thought would be impactful.
Yep.
And you may disagree, but I feel like we're in a very similar part or similar place today, with the advent of AI and a lot of the, advancements with quantum computing, all of the unbelievable advancements that have happened, it seems to me like so quickly. Do you agree, disagree in terms of sort of where we are now, sort of at a inflection point in terms of what is what you see sort of coming down the road technology wise?
Absolutely. 100%. And just to finish the journey at Fresh, like, after 10 years, we were a digital company, and I was speaking in New York again on where the future was going. And instead of talking about the beginning of social applications and mobile applications in the cloud, these are now mainstream. And I was talking about, hey, the future is going to be AI. It's going to be AR. It's going to be robotics. It's going to be advanced biometrics. It's going to be all this stuff on the backbone of the cloud, like like appliances plug into electricity. And I was talking about, how the confluence of these things, when they work together, is going to make dramatic changes. And that's going to build on top of these things like the cloud and mobile compute in our pocket. And so I gave that presentation to a client, and it was much like a presentation I'd given, 10 years prior on different technologies, essentially. But those had grown up, and these were the babies of today. And after that, I was like, we're not Fresh anymore. And so like our mission was to kind of help people stay relevant and stay ahead, one or the other. And so we got interested in hardware and kind of robotics, AI, AR, like some of these new spaces that we're going to grow up in. So now for the last 7 years, we've been playing in those spaces. And so we've kind of stayed true to our mission of who we are. And now we're at another inflection point, especially with AI, generative AI and robotics and quantum computing. we're at another inflection point. We're at the very beginning of another 10-year transformation.
Mm.
So much like this is as big as the internet is right now. We're at the beginning of, it's like this is like the beginning of the smartphone era, or the beginning of, social media before software as a service. We're at the very beginning of a very huge movement with artificial intelligence, and that being a multiplier and a magnifier over every other technology. And so that is another transformational moment where, again, at Fresh, we're like, hey, we need to help others stay ahead. We need to stay relevant. And so we're remodeling our services as we speak,
Yeah.
because the future is going to be changed. It's going to be a big bang sort of type experience. Like we had generative AI was a small bang, and we're going into a big bang type of experience with AI, and it's going to change work much like computers change work. And people feared robotics. They feared, they feared computers much like they fear robotics and AI. And the reality is that it's going to change work. People are going to lose jobs. And the reality is, if we go back to the computer, it created that change. It created work did change dramatically. We now have way more knowledge workers than we do have manual laborers, and the same thing will happen in the future. Work is going to change dramatically as a result of AI. But the World Economic Forum believes that more jobs will be created than lost because work will just change.
Yeah.
So it's a really exciting time to be part of right now, given how fast things are going, incredibly fast. And so we can talk more about this, about AI, but it's a fun time to be involved in the confluence of business and emerging technologies.
Absolutely. I've had a couple of guests recently, and we've talked a little bit about some of this. And what strikes me is what you mentioned, the speed, right? I mean, if you go back and sort of study the prior transformational events with technology, I think it's easy to sort of assume that, oh yeah, well, the internet changed things over the course of 15, 20 years. Now we're going to go into one of those 15 or 20 years from now. It seems to me that, with Moore's law or whatever you want to call it, that the change, the rate of change seems exponential, and that it will be far quicker. I mean, what do I know? I'm not an expert in any of this by any means, but I just get the feeling that it's going to take a lot of people by surprise. It's going to happen more quickly or faster than anticipated. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it will. We're already seeing that today. So the adoption of AI, we're already in the middle market for consumers. Like 50% of the world has experienced generative AI. And that
Wow.
has never happened so fast. Voice AI was really quick when voice AI kind of came out, as far as having these, I would say, Alexa and Siri. Yeah. These are kind of these are kind of early instances of AI, but they do like party tricks. They're basic, they're dumb in a sense for where we're going.
Yeah.
So things are moving really fast. ChatGPT was adopted faster than it was like 0 to 100 million in 2 months, and then like I said, now within 2 years we're already half the world's experiencing it routinely. And that happens a lot because we have these computers in our pocket now, right? And so when they adopt a new technology, then it can happen really quickly through that infrastructure. But that doesn't mean people are going to use stuff, but they are. They are using this new technology in novel ways, and it's affecting almost every technology. I think McKinsey said if you're a technology company, you're not incorporating AI, you might become obsolete in 3 to 4 years. So as we talk about the speed of change, that's one example. Another big thing that's happened is, and this is all centered around generative AI and the GPT. And the T in GPT, the general pre-trained transformer, the transformer is what in 2017, Google came out with the transformer in this research paper. And it was like this novel way to be able to transform, text eventually into vectors, and to put this multi-head listening mechanism on top of this information to retrieve it, and create this, brain-like interface over this compressed knowledge, essentially. knowledge compression. And they didn't know what they created, what they did, until OpenAI kind of picked it up and created an organization around it. And then they got caught, on their back foot, and have been trying to kind of catch up ever since. But this technology has we brought forward at an order of magnitude anywhere from like 5 years to 50 years, like forward, our predictions about human level performance on like 20 different categories. And there's a study has been done on this, where it's like we are predicting now that we're going to achieve human level performance within years for things that we were thinking we're going to take 10, 20 years from now. Like, and part of that is we're at the beginning of AI. Like, we're at the very beginning of generative AI, and we're just now this year getting into agentic AI, where you can orchestrate multiple AI agents that will do layers and layers of complexity. So instead of like giving discrete tasks and getting some answers back, it's like, no, I can give you a complex task, and you might go run on that for 10, 20 minutes and then come back with a much smarter answer. And so we're just going to, like, the orders of magnitude are just going to continue to accelerate with AI. And we're already seeing really exciting things. Technology companies are already being flipped on their heads. Services are already changing. Our services have dramatically had to change within software. People in software can be 40% more productive with this. And that's just, we were on the cusp because software developers were involved. But like every industry is going to be impacted to some extent by AI, with having assistants that can do very complex tasks, and that can augment us, magnify what we do, automate what we do. People worry about replacement, and there will be an efficiency factor with this, but it will also create new work. It always has. It creates new work. And you look at people, the billionaires of the world, like, they make all this money and they don't just sit on their heads. They actually now want to, like, go to the moon or create something more complex or solve a bigger problem. That's human nature. Like, when we as human beings, as creators, as creative people, when we solve things and we end up with more time, we go up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so I think it will be hard, but in the end, I think we'll create more jobs.
Well, I love that. That's great to hear, because there's a lot of noise out there at the moment as it relates to AI, a lot of negative noise. And I think my take on, I think that people, like very, very smart people like yourself, recognize and tell and explain that this is going to change things dramatically. And I think most people don't like change, but I think what the real issue here is that there isn't any like real sort of meat on the bone in terms of what does that look like? What does that mean? Right? Yes, the AI is going to change things, but what will it into what? Right? And you said something a minute ago. You said that that people will have digital assistants to be able to help with complex tasks.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's a brilliant way to sort of summarize it. Is that, I mean, help sort of paint a picture for what you see. I mean, this is the broadest question in the history of the world. I don't know if it's answerable, but in terms of a typical small business, right? If a small business came to you and they were like, this AI thing scared me, what do I do? I mean, what do you tell them in terms of what will change and what things are going to look like?
Yeah. And so we do strategy work right now for some businesses. And part of it is looking at what people do. Right? Like, well, what do you do? Tell us about the tasks you do. Tell us about the processes. Tell us what information you have at your disposal, and tell us what tools you use. As you think about the tools and the information, the tasks that people do, all of those things can be, AI is ubiquitous. All of those things AI can augment, assist, amplify any of those things. And right now we're dealing with still some simple things, like we're retrieving information, we're synthesizing information. But the reality is, like, knowledge work is often, it's not just simple stuff. It gets more complex when you start synthesizing lots of things, and it's multimodal in that, like, I have imagery and text that I'm combining into a presentation or with some graphics or something like that, right? So, like, we have more complex manifestations of information. You got papers, but then you got presentations, you got videos, and all of this stuff we have all these ingredients now with AI, and it's going to be started to put together, where you can ask in a natural way for something to get done, and it will get done. But it might take an AI, and so the deep AI research that's coming out right now is it's doing these complex tasks where it's going to go like, I'm going to go get some answers, I'm going to go do some research, and then I'm going to think about it for a little bit, and I'm going to run some tests on what I got, and then I'm going to work on it some more. And it's sort of what a human does, right? Except for that it just might be 10 times as fast. So part of this is about speed. It's like speed at getting information and speed about producing the whatever you do now in a way that's acceptable. And technology itself isn't like, if you think about iPhones as an example, or a smartphone, and like they have, like iPhone has that facial login feature where I can like look at the phone, it opens up the phone. If that doesn't work like 95% of the time or 97% of the time, it's not really highly usable. It needs to work almost all the time. And so we're at a point where like AI is doing some interesting things, but it's not like quite solving all of our work problems right now. It's not quite doing our work, but we're getting there, right? We're progressing along the chain where it's getting more and more and more and more sophisticated to be able to get work done. And so as it gets our work done, it'll, our assistants get our work done, just like a normal assistant would, then allows us to do other things. So, I mean, it's pretty ubiquitous, but like, today, whether that's AI or robotics, you have to be more directive. If I want to give you an example of like, hey, hey, robot, go mow the lawn, or do my laundry or whatever, you got to give like 30 steps in order to actually do that. But now with agentic AI and then AI connecting to machines, we're now at a really interesting point in the history of robotics where that's going to accelerate too. And that's why you see a lot of people investing in humanoids, because the intelligence is caught up to the machine, right? And the machine's cost is coming down. So we're at an interesting explosion point, in my opinion. And that's why it's like Big Bang. Like, maybe we're not quite there yet, but like agentic AI is moving towards this artificial general intelligence, and that is being able to do just more complex work. Now, not all work is complex, but the more we solve basic work, the more it allows us to think more complex and creative as human beings. So my answer is almost anything, can be supported by AI. And so when we're doing analysis for small businesses, like one analysis recently done was like, here's 71 ways that it can help you run your business. And so it's pretty universal.
Wow. Well, so I just want to talk just a minute. I'm being conscious of time here, but the sort of this intersection of, as you mentioned, so AI with robotics and automation, et cetera. I think it's logical to understand, or to sort of foresee kind of a super smart digital assistant that can help in lots of different sort of ancillary ways. But for, a commercial painting company, right?
Yeah.
Like, somebody that it requires manual labor or actual.
Yep.
Hey, what do you think? What are you thinking there?
I mean, 100%. Like, think about commercial painting. I'm glad you brought up that example, but I mean, really, you can bring up any example. If you have a smart machine that's paired with that, like, so take painting, for example. If I tell a drone to go scan, building and create a 3D model, and then hook it up to some fine-tuned paint applicator, which they're already building, then I could go tell it to go paint that house, or paint that building, right? They're spraying anyway. So, I mean, that'd be an example where you're using AI, you're using computer vision, which is a form of AI, and then you're using machinery to go get a task done. And that would be, I believe commercial painting will change. But this is where like the work will still be there, but it'll be a different type of work. Right. Robotics shines with anything that's dirty, dull, or dangerous. So, you get up high, human beings get up high on something, then you're going to shine there. But what is dull and mundane is changing for us as human beings. Like, and through the pandemic, we found that a lot of people did go back to what they saw was more mundane work. They wanted something more meaningful. So a lot of these industries, like the restaurant industry, construction industry, manufacturing, they weren't getting their workers back. And so that's created more need for automation. Combine that with what's going on from a geopolitical perspective, and the interest in kind of having more capability here, and giving the pain that we've seen from supply chain perspective, and then the rising costs in other second or third world countries, that's creating more demand for machinery locally. And so whether it's, surveying places with robotics and drones, or any other business, you combine the technology with AI, and there's like just, lots of things that are possible. I would say a lot of stuff that's early stage right now, but I think we're at the beginning of, the technology being there where when you combine it, it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd love to catch up after this and tell you, about my business and what we do, and understand a little bit more about what, how you guys, engage businesses like mine. But so do you have, you know, prospects or potential clients coming and saying, "Hey, look, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going on. Can I engage with you guys to come up with a strategic plan for how to leverage this stuff?" And is that a typical arrangement?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And we work with like 100 clients in a year. We have
Okay.
about 400 team members. So we do the consulting side, and then our differentiators that we execute. Like we don't just give the recommendations, we actually go work and help you get it done. So we do a lot of uh, development and kind of execution work, a lot of software work, a lot of hardware work, in particular, a lot of product development. But on the consulting side, that's kind of part of our mission, is how do we help companies stay ahead or stay relevant, one of the two.
Nice. Nice. So for all you business owners out there that are scared of AI or curious about AI, Fresh Consulting, Jeff Dance is the place to go. In all seriousness, though, so what? Tell us your. You guys have a website, web presence, I assume.
Mhm.
If for those more interested in Fresh Consulting, where do they go?
Yeah, our website's a good place. You can kind of see the details of our service. Is over 100 different kind of case study or portfolio pieces of the type of work we do. We work with small businesses, large businesses. We work with some of the biggest technology businesses as far as like working on that stuff ahead. But a lot of businesses are just like, hey, how do I stay relevant? How do I kind of have an edge when I'm going to market, or do something a little bit more efficient? So we're not like a huge consulting firm. We're also not like so small that like, we're kind of in between. So we tend to be able to work with, um, different sizes of companies. There is a size that might be too small, to say, hey, I want to pay for like a small team. If otherwise, we'd be like, yeah, find a contractor. But as far as having some expertise around what we do, and having a process, and making sure we get to the goals we set out together. I mean, that's what we're about, is trying to accelerate our clients' roadmaps.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So it's, if you knew how much we talked about this around here, you'd laugh. We do 12 to 15,000 surveys a month all across the country for large production home builders, and it is very ripe. And I think we will experience a lot of disruption in this industry very soon with
Mm-hmm.
AI and robotics. But as I'm sure there is the same case in lots of industries. All right, two final questions.
Yeah.
The first is, are there, in doing all of this, being in the middle of it, I mean, are there any specific opportunities that you have sort of stumbled across or come across or thought about recently that you're like, I can't believe nobody's doing this? Then if so, would love to hear about them.
Mm-hmm.
If you're assuming that you want to throw it out onto the public airwaves.
I would say I probably once a month I have a business idea, and I think that if you're like an entrepreneur, you tend to have lots of ideas and not enough time or people. But one of the things I've learned is the importance of focus. Like focusing on what you do, being good at that, and then and I think with generative AI, you can take things a lot further. Actually, you can model things in 3D. You can like, hey, put together a business plan for this idea that I have, or create some concept images for me. Like you can store those ideas. So I would say That's no exception to my mind to have lots of ideas and to think about, why isn't someone doing this? But my ideas range from like new snowboard products to that are digital oriented to, you know, apparatuses in a rock climbing gym to ideas around braces that would be more effective for human beings, you know, to like, you know, AI oriented applications that are very, very niche to a particular thing, but are very, very deep, you know. So I don't have like any one big one, but I will say I have lots of ideas.
Yeah. You sounds like you have a similar brain to mine. It's hard to get it to turn off. It's what it sounds like.
Exactly.
No, I love it. So last question. I can only imagine how much you have learned and experienced since you first started Fresh. If you had the chance, this is such a cliche question, but I find it to be very revealing. If you had a chance to go back to 2007 and spend 5 minutes with your younger self, what would you tell that version of Jeff?
Yeah, for one, I would say to have a bit more balance. You know, I think I worked till 2 a.m. for like 7 years straight, and I think it is, as young as I am, like it still affected my health in sort of a negative way. And I think there's a lot of even though we kind of look to business leaders that have started something from scratch, there's a lot of pain in starting something yourself, and that can be really hard. So lots of ups and downs. So I would say make sure to get some sleep. Focus on your health as like a primary thing, because I think when you focus on yourself, then you're in a stronger position to actually serve others. And it's not just what you do, it's kind of how you do it as well. So I think that was something I would tell myself. I would also reinforce, hiring others. And I've tried to hire people that are smarter than I, but sometimes, I think we could have done that a little bit sooner. And, taking a leap of faith, versus I think we always got to the brink of like almost like a burnout moment. And then I was like, okay, I'll hire someone else.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've grown the company by continually giving up roles, because I've kind of held every role. But I think when you're onto something, you can build some of that structure in a little bit earlier.
Gotcha. Great answer. Well, Jeff, you guys are into some interesting and exciting stuff, and appreciate you sharing your story, and wish you guys all the best. You guys heard it. If you're running a legitimate business, not just a tiny one, and you need one of the world's best in consultants with regard to what's your strategy for leveraging this technology, Fresh Consulting is the way to go.
Thank you.
So,
my pleasure to be here. Great.
Don't forget, everybody, you can find Boundary Breakers in a lot of places. You can watch our episodes on the Boundary Breakers YouTube channel, or you can listen to each podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other major podcasting platforms. Thanks for listening.